The Indianapolis Colts' 2024 season didn't go quite as planned, missing the postseason again in the process. But there were plenty of standouts, also letdowns, and intriguing performances that warrant some awards. So, which players are worthy of the nominations? Who was the best and the worst of the bunch? And who do you, the fans, think are most deserving? Well, guess what? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. I am Drake Wally, co-host of the channel, deputy editor for the site. And of course, I am joined by none other than Noah Gebert, also analyst for the site and co-host for the channel. Noah, this is one that we, a lot of people, they might go, oh gosh, award show. We had to do it. This is a season where, while it was an 8-9 finish and it wasn't exactly great, there were still guys that stood tall. Their stock rose. It gives you hope going into the next season. But guess what? We also do have to talk about the negatives. So how you doing, man? I'm pumped to talk about this one.
Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm just going into this offseason. We're trying to figure out everything we can cover. I think with just the way that things have gone with the Colts fan base lately, we maybe need something positive to talk about at this point. So some awards are good to give out. I think, yeah, even when you're having a disappointing season after disappointing season like the Colts have had, it's smart to take a step back and kind of evaluate, okay, they're keeping the same front office. They're definitely not cleaning house of all these players. Let's recognize who the good players are, the standout performances that they had this past season, what they can build on going forward. I think awards are a good way to do that, as well as point out some of those negative things that you mentioned.
Yeah, and as people kind of get into the chat here, we're going to cover everything from most improved to most consistent to biggest disappointment, and we're each going to pretty much be giving our own. Now, some of these we might agree on, who knows, because there's a lot to talk about here. But what we'll go ahead and do is, we're just going to jump right into this. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total awards. I did stop at 9, but who the hell wants to talk about 9 awards when you can talk about 10? So what we're going to go ahead and start with, and I'll start and then Noah will start. We'll just kind of snake this thing. Really simply, the most improved. And when I look at most improved, there were actually quite a few guys that could have qualified for this, but there's just one that stands out without question the most to me, and that's Alec Pierce. I really thought that Alec Pierce shined. Very brief here. He goes into the offseason. People are like, well, this guy can't really play that well. He's just a downfield threat. He's just a blocker. Keep in mind, he also had Gardner Minshew throwing him the football. At one time, he had Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, and Sam Ehlinger tossing him the pill. This guy, his strengths were supposed to match Matt Ryan's quote unquote arm strength in his rookie year. That didn't work out because his arm turned into a wet rag. And then it was supposed to fit Anthony Richardson. Gardner Minshew is clearly not a downfield thrower. So this was a huge season. They go and they draft A.D. Mitchell. That puts pressure on Alec Pierce. And I remember guys like me were like, well, Alec Pierce is going to be the wide receiver 4. Goes out there. He doesn't catch as many passes as he did in his rookie season. But we're talking about 41 catches for 593 yards in his rookie year, as opposed to 37 catches for 824 freaking yards, 22.3 per catch, led the NFL in average. 7 receiving touchdowns. I believe he led the team in that too. 32 first downs. That means only 5 of his catches weren't for a first down. Alec Pierce, absolute dog, absolute Colt. I think he fits the culture of this team. He fits exactly what they're trying to do. He just seems like an Indianapolis Colt. What are your thoughts on AP number 14?
Yeah, so most improved was our first category here, and just because you put Alec Pierce, I felt like I had to put a different name. But I agree. I think most improved should go to Alec Pierce. I think he's the official. We can stamp him as the official Horseshoe Huddle Podcast most improved player on the Colts.
That's right.
Just the year that he had. Yeah, I think everybody was coming into the season thinking that he would be wide receiver 4 just because of the hype for A.D. Mitchell. Just kind of what they thought that he could be and how he would kind of exactly fill the role that Alec Pierce has supposed to fill in the past few years. And then this season he came out and just wild how consistently he was able to beat people down the field and win those 50-50 balls, even when he's not beating people down the field. I think that's awesome to be able to hang your hat on going forward, knowing that didn't really materialize in the first few years, but this year, you saw flashes of that in the first few years that he was playing, and then last year it was like you had the quarterback play at that point to actually force the issue a little bit more, take more of those chances. And he came down with the same percentage of chances that he's always come down with. He was just getting more opportunities. So you would like to think that going forward, you continue to give him that same volume of deep shots, that he'll continue to come down with those balls with around 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, whatever. And you can count on that consistently moving forward.
Yeah, and about the only downside you can talk about is that he didn't catch more than 40 passes. But, when you catch 22.3 yards per reception,
yeah,
you don't really need to. You know what I mean? Real quick, first super chat of the day. Truitt, absolutely legendary, my friend. Thank you so much for the support. As always, a hell of a guy. And then this is actually a comment I wanted to highlight real quick. I think this is Stats Matt, third host of the show. Stats Matt's comment is presented by Busch Light Peach. I've decided, Stats, that's going to be your sponsor for the day. Is Busch Light Peach. He's a peach guy. He's a Busch Light guy. So I think some of Alec's improvements were in relation to the arm strength of the QB. So I'm going with me and Noah's boy in Jalen Jones. So there's Stats Matt. People hate the idea of him starting going into 2024. But yeah, since we're talking about AP here, that really had a big deal to do it. And then one more comment here before we get to Noah's Alec Pierce. This is from Perp. Alec Pierce is literally Jordy Nelson reincarnated. Can't wait when we get a real QB this offseason. Well, we'll have to see what happens with the QB situation, but I think that Alec Pierce is here to stay. So, Noah, enough about Alec Pierce. Let's go ahead and get to your Most Improved Player Award. Take it away.
Yeah, so I was a little bit sad about this one because I think had he played a full season, he would have been far and away the guy if he kept up the level of play that he played at. And that's Will Fries. He only played 5 games this season, but really showed that he was a standout starter. Well above average, would be one of the top or like a top 10 guard if he continued on the way that he was playing in those first 5 games for the Colts. So it sucks to see that season cut short. But going forward, if you're hoping to expect that kind of play out of him, I think he's a must re-sign this offseason. And far and away, a much better performance that he's put up in the first few years. You like to see him finally kind of grasp everything with that offense, being that 7th round pick that he was back in 2021. So yeah, this was the year it seemed like it finally clicked for him. It was just a shame to see it end so early.
Yeah, and something that I saw this when I was writing a piece. So Will Fries, just real brief PFF grades from 2022. Overall 58. And there's points, but I'm just going to give the whole number. Overall 58, pass blocking 44, run blocking 66. Clearly indicative of a guy who can't pass block, right? Well, then 2023, 61 overall, 65 pass blocking, and then he dropped a little bit in the run game to 59, basically 60. And then you go to this season, and while he only played 5 games, he had an 87 overall grade. He had a 75 pass blocking grade, and the dude had an 85 run blocking grade. Guess what? 4th overall for guards in the NFL in overall grade out of 135, and then 5th in run blocking grade. This dude was an absolute monster. He was a monster out there. What do you think that outside of the injury? Do you think there's anything that he could work on? Really? Other than just continuing.
It would just be trying to find that consistency and make sure those first 5 games weren't a fluke. It's hard to imagine they were, just because you kind of saw that gradual improvement in 2023, and then he took another step up in 2024. I don't think there's necessarily anything he needs to work on other than coming back healthy and proving that those first 5 games are what he is now at this point in his career.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, Will Fries, the sky's the limit. Now, here's the big thing. He is a free agent. He is going to be paid more than, he probably is in line for like a $12, $14, $15 million deal.
Yeah.
He's going to make good money. He's absolutely earned it. And I think that, you can argue, well, what about the other 12 games? Does he keep that up? Who cares? He had 5 straight games where he was kicking but I think that the consistency was already starting to build up for the guy. So also 7th-round pick from Penn State, and he absolutely hits like a first-round guard. But this next one, so we're going to go ahead and switch it off here from most improved to the biggest surprises. So I love the ones that we've got both on one side of the football.
Yeah.
And I actually agree more in a way with yours than I do my own. So I'm going to go ahead and let Noah take this first one away.
Yeah, I wish we were kind of throwing them both at the same time so we could compare them, but we'll do that when we get to yours. I'd say mine is just the biggest surprise because literally zero was expected out of him, right? And he came in and became a solid starter on that, or above average starter for a while, and then I think I saw stats Matt mentioned here in the chat kind of fell off a little bit more towards the end of the year, and that'd be Sam Womack, the corner you claimed off of waivers from San Francisco, who you claimed when Dallas Flowers was kind of going through the situation that he was going through, where he wasn't showing that maybe he was back all the way from his injury and he wasn't playing up to snuff. And you were kind of toying with the fact of who do we turn to at that outside corner spot, and you didn't really have anybody. And then you claimed Sam Womack, and it took a couple weeks before he got off of the special teams only kind of role that they had, and they threw him out into the lineup. And there was a couple weeks where they were kind of going 50-50 with the snaps, him and Dallas Flowers, and it became very clear who the better corner was at the outside spot. So I think,
Right.
just in terms of biggest surprise, if you go from a waiver claim at the start of the season to solid starting outside corner, I think that's a huge surprise.
Yeah, and the thing about Sam Womack is there were times where he quote unquote got exposed. I mean, there's no quote about it. He actually did, especially against Denver. But at the end of the day, when you look into what was invested in the guy, almost nothing.
Yeah.
And you do kind of look at Ballard like that's the most you really did in free agency. If he doesn't hit, that looks like just a total whiff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the dude, I mean, he had plenty of moments where he forced turnovers. He was sticky enough in coverage. I know that one of the interceptions came against the Broncos. I mean, Sam Womack, as long as he can somehow continue this rise that he's seen with the Indianapolis Colts defense, I don't really see any reason why you wouldn't keep him,
Yeah.
especially for depth. And he's probably not going to cost that much. But love that one. Mine is Nick Cross. The reason I say Nick Cross is because I truly did not expect him to do this well. I did
Yeah.
not think that he was going to come out on a heater like he did. I think that when you look at Nick Cross's performance, it gives you so much confidence, if for no other reason from what you didn't see from Julian Blackmon. You're looking at this guy who can definitely improve in coverage. But I mean, he had to pick up so much of the slack tackling. The guy just did not relent when it came to the tackling. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure the guy had like over 130, 140 tackles. He had turnovers. He flew to the football. There were times where this guy was just an absolute, missile all over the field. He did not give up. And, I remember during the off season, but my goodness, man, he really had the ire of everyone when he hurt Josh Downs and then just kind of doubled down on, well, that's not my problem kind of thing. And a lot of people were like, well, dude, you barely played in your rookie year. You get benched for Rodney McLeod, and then you are kind of like on a short leash in 2023. Didn't really play more than like 300 snaps. So like you're looking at year 3, like what is this guy going to do? All he did was go out there and absolutely ball out. Again, he's got room to improve, most notably coverage. He's definitely a strong safety. But what were your thoughts on Nick Cross? I think that the sky's the limit for this kid.
Yeah, I think we kind of took similar paths where Womack was, you expect nothing because he was a waiver wire claim. Where Nick Cross, maybe there were some expectations, but coming out of training camp, everybody had kind of written off the fact that he was going to really be a difference maker. People were calling for him to be cut from the team just because of the Josh Downs thing that happened and how he handled that afterwards. So I mean, biggest surprise. You're going from high expectations at the beginning of camp all the way down because he couldn't like outright win that other starting safety spot, and then straight back up this season for being that consistent starter at safety. It was really awesome to see, especially see the fans' opinion change of him after kind of what went down at training camp. Just maybe a reminder for us next year when some storylines happen down in training camp to not overreact a little bit too much. Yeah, Nick Cross, big surprise. I mean, I think maybe not as huge of a surprise for the Colts because I think they've been expecting this of him for a while since they drafted him, and I knew they had to be patient with him because of how young he was when he got drafted. But it did seem like it finally clicked, at least to a certain extent. And he didn't end up being this kind of position versatile guy that you were hoping he would be, where they even played around with the idea of maybe he can play in the slot, he can play both safety spots. I think when you finally locked down and you set him at strong safety and said, okay, you're going to be here, that allowed him to just kind of blossom.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking here. I mean, he played 16 games, started 2 in 2022, played 17, started 2 in 2023. Then the guy starts all 17 games. He has 3 interceptions, 5 passes defended, a fumble forced, a sack, and 87 solo tackles with 146 total. I mean, that's not good. Actually, if you think about the defense, that's not good if you're safety. I don't think any safety was making that many tackles, but I digress. Nick Cross, Sam Womack, those are the guys that we think are the biggest surprises. So now we got to get to one that's going to be a little bit more difficult, and I want to hear people's opinions in the comments. I mean, please let them flow forth. But we're going to get this out of the way. These are the biggest disappointments, and I'll start here. This one it wasn't easy for me to come up with this, but it wasn't easy as an analyst because I've seen the growth. I saw him drafted, the build up, the hype, and it was easy though as a choice. That's the thing, is Anthony Richardson. I thought that, boy, he looked shaken as a passer. You're talking about a guy that completed about 47% of his passes. He was, he turned the ball over. I think he had 12 interceptions. He had 9 total fumbles. He had just a slew of games where you're like, you're doing this. You're just like, and the thing is, I think that some of it was, growing up in the NFL. I think that some of it is growing as a quarterback and a leader. You got to think this guy's just been able to just destroy people his entire career. Gets to the NFL, realizes, okay, you can get your bell rung, But I will say there were moments like against the Jets, against the Patriots, dare I even say against the Lions, where you're like, okay, you've really got something here. And when he looked good, but I just felt like more often than not, Anthony Richardson just didn't look like a field general or a starter. He has a lot of improvements to make. What were your thoughts on his 2024?
Yeah, I think biggest bit disappointment is nail on the head there for Anthony Richardson. Just because, I mean, to win this award, you have to have super high expectations going into the season. Yeah. And there were no expectations higher on any Colts player than what they were for Anthony Richardson. At least on the optimistic fan side, kind of what he could do and the talent that he possessed and everything that everyone's talked about his ceiling since he's come into the league and what the Colts could potentially be when they have the alien at quarterback. So just to see, and after you saw what you saw in his rookie year and how well he played, and then to see that regression, I think was a huge disappointment. Because just you see in that rookie year, I mean, even aside from all the freaky athletic stuff, he played well his rookie year. It wasn't super consistent. He wasn't going to be like really high completion percentage, not super accurate, but he was making all those plays that you wanted to make and not making all those negative plays that he seemed to make this year. So yeah, biggest disappointment just because of the weight that position carries, and then just the situation that Anthony Richardson himself is in, because of where the Colts are at and how much is relying on him. Definitely would have been the biggest disappointment for me as well.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, man, I mean, the jury's still out. He's still super young. He still has a lot of room to grow. But here's the thing, man. The NFL is completely and utterly unforgiving. It is so unforgiving. No one cares about your age if you're going into year 3. Look at Nick Cross. He was young as hell walking into year 3. Everyone was like, you better be a starter. He goes out there and he did it. So this is a huge year for Anthony Richardson. You're gonna know a lot about AR going into this season and about the midway point. But I also agree with yours, Noah. The one you selected might not be of the weight or the vibrant nature of Anthony Richardson, but go ahead and tell yours because I 100% agree.
Yeah, so I went with Julian Blackmon here, largely because when you're talking about that secondary on the defense and what was such a worrisome spot when you're going into training camp and you're up in the air about Nick Cross, whether he can be the starting safety on the other side. it really sucks when the guy that you were counting on to be the stalwart ended up being more of a liability than the guy that you weren't sure on going into the year. Yeah, so Julian Blackmon being that veteran presence, I think took a step back in coverage. The ball production wasn't there. He wasn't making those plays. He wasn't as consistent of a tackler as he needed to be, much like the rest of the Colts defense. But I think when you were relying on that in the secondary, everyone going into the season was talking about how the secondary needed some reinforcements, needed some help. And that was with the assumption that Julian Blackmon was going to play well. And then he didn't play well on top of that. So you're lucky you had some other guys step up. You're lucky that Jalen Jones and Sam Womack ended up being okay on the outside. And you're lucky that Nick Cross became the consistent starter at safety like he did. Because man, if they didn't work out like all signs maybe pointed to at one point, and then you had that season out of Julian Blackmon, then it was going to be a rough year.
Yeah, and I do have to say that Julian Blackmon is a hell of a football player. All right, he's going to give it all he's got, but I really do think that he is starting to see some injuries slow him down a bit. I think that he also just has the injury history, but his numbers will absolutely deceive you. I mean, 3 interceptions. He had 4 passes defended. He had a fumble recovery. He had 86 tackles, 2 shy of his career high. He even had a quarterback hit, and he's not typically known for getting in the backfield, but it was just the let-ups. It was just the really inopportune let-ups, man. And Nick Cross just seemed like the superior player between the two. You can replace Julian Blackmon in free agency. You can replace Julian Blackmon in the draft. So I do think that that's an absolutely fantastic one. But real quick, we do got to get to a couple of these comments. Let me see here. Yeah, this one was tough. And actually, I got to get to this one. The Bears game. The Bears game was my lowest Anthony Richardson game of the year. He threw the most disgusting interception into the end zone with 2 defenders in front of Drew Ogletree. I mean, he looked right at him and pumped it and still threw it. So a lot of room for AR to grow. Biggest disappointment from the one and only Rich Wheeler was making Drew Lock look like an NFL MVP. Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. And then Juju Brents. That's also a really
disappointing on another level. Yeah.
Yes, can't stay healthy, can't stay on the field. He comes back from a knee injury and then has a groin issue. So you're really, really hoping Juju Brents can stay healthy because, man, that's looking like it's looking like a rough one so far. But this next one, I really like Noah's here too. And this one's going to be let me see here. So the most consistent. Sorry, I got a little lost in my layers there. This one is just the stalwarts, the guys who day in, game out, you might have 1 or 2 plays that are let up, or maybe they have 1 bad game out of 17. But these guys are both, yet again, on the same side of the football. I will go ahead and let you start this one off, Noah.
Yeah, ours both on the same side of the football and in very similar situations, I think, which kind of, I think, shows where the strength of this team is at, right? And I went with Bernhard Raimann, our left tackle, who's kind of flourished and become this guy that you're going to have to pay big money for eventually. He's factoring into your plans going forward big time just because of the consistency that he's provided, how healthy he's been, and just kind of his overall progression over the last 3 years and where he's ended up. And I think consistently every week that's somebody you can rely on, much like somebody else on the offensive line.
Yeah, Bernhard Raimann, of course, he started his career very shaky in 2022. Then you started to see it at the end of that season. You started to see the athleticism catch up. And I remember asking him that offseason, what has helped you? What's helped your feet? What's helped your progression here? And how did tight end? Because he used to play tight end. It's like, how did that help you? And in the most joyful, happy way possible, because this guy is literally a walking happiness. Like, this dude is just so upbeat. And of course, Patrick with the savage super chat of saying Grant Stewart in all caps. Patrick, you are an absolute menace. And then he also did mention something. He said Julian Blackmon was a bare minimum free agent signing. Didn't expect much. A guy that they let go out to the market, nobody picked him up. So, but yeah, Bernhard Raimann, man. I mean, he hit his stride after tight end really helped him with his speed and his feet. Last year, he looked great. This year, he just looked like an absolute beast on the left side. And he's going to be able to shore up that blind side for Anthony Richardson. And the thing is, you haven't had that kind of consistency since one Anthony Costanzo.
Yeah.
Like, you really haven't. They had Eric Fisher that one year. He couldn't stay healthy. But yeah, man, Bernhard Raimann, I mean, I'm looking at his PFF grades here, 85.1 overall, 82.0 pass blocking, 80.7 run blocking. His overall grade is top 10 and the others are top 20. So
Yeah.
I think Bernhard Raimann's an absolute unit.
And he's one of those guys that if you're worried about the turnover that might happen if the Colts have another disappointing season, no matter what head coach, what GM comes in, Bernhard Raimann should be a building block for the Colts, no matter what the front office or the coaching staff ends up looking like for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, forever. I mean, they will need to make a priority to keep Bernhard Raimann and pay that man the money he deserves, or someone else will. So most consistent, we've got StatsMat saying DeForest Buckner, the one and only Rich Wheeler saying DeForest Buckner. I felt like that was a little too easy, but then now that I'm thinking about it, this one's also too easy. And that is Quentin Nelson. All right, Quentin Nelson, man, don't even really need to talk long about Big Q. 7 Pro Bowls, 7 seasons, just perennial all-pro talent, just destroys people. He had a phenomenal season. One game he didn't even look like himself. That was against the Lions, and he just was terrible. But then he bounces back like a monster. So this is a guy that's just he's never going to be bad for long. If he has a rough game, he's going to be able to mask it over with 16 out of 17 phenomenal performances. Just continues to shine. What are your thoughts on Quentin Nelson? I know that we've got potential change with Ryan Kelly, change with Braden Smith, possibly Will Fries. This is a guy that just seems like a constant motor. What are your thoughts on Big Q?
Yeah, great player, obviously. And I think one thing when you're thinking about most consistent player, you're thinking about a high level of play that he's sustained throughout the season and also played every game of the season, right? So some guy that's healthy who's going to give you that consistency. I think the name of consistency is going to be, can we count on you week in, week out? And health's going to factor into that a lot. So most consistent this year, I think I know I said Bernhard Raimann, but I would lean Quentin Nelson. I know people brought up a little bit of DeForest Buckner, who has that high level of consistent play, and you can expect that week in and week out, but he did miss some time this year. So just for what he gave the Colts for all 17 games, I think Quentin Nelson is the right move here.
Yeah, and look, this is an offensive line that even if you don't keep Ryan Kelly and you don't keep Braden Smith, you already kind of invested in the backups. You know, the guys that are going to replace him in Gonsalves and Tanner Bortolini, and you didn't draft those guys for depth. You know, you didn't draft those guys for depth. You drafted them to be future starters. So I think that Quentin Nelson, Bernhard Raimann, both incredibly deserving of both of these. But now we're going to get to kind of the middle portion, and I love this one. Now, there's going to be some of these guys that, you know, there's going to be certain people that might not agree, but let us know in the chat. But the next one is most poised for a breakout in 2025. So I'll go ahead and start with mine. He basically turned himself into the number one offensive, pass catching option. That's Josh Downs. Josh Downs, man. There's really not much to say about Josh Downs other than he just doesn't let up. He's only improving. He's only getting better. Okay, this guy went from a quick win guy to a guy who's now making freaking plays downfield. He set the tone. He's a guy that was creating separation against anyone. And you put him in the slot, and he made himself into a top 5 slot receiver. Any given Sunday, he was the best slot receiver in football. Like, he looks like a star. And I think that what you can expect from Josh Downs, if Anthony Richardson could put it together, at least a little bit, and get on the right track to his development, you're looking at a guy who could catch 90 to 100 passes. You're looking at a guy who could have over 1,000 yards. You're looking at a guy who, weirdly, even though he's small, he's a red zone threat. The guy catches touchdowns. And you saw it with Joe Flacco this season. He absolutely torched the Titans. And Joe Flacco hit him on a gorgeous pass where he jumped up, extended all the way out, caught that thing, came down with it. Just an absolute beast of a football player. What are your thoughts on Josh Downs? I think that, Michael Pittman, he was playing with literally a fractured back? So it's a little difficult to play that well when you're hurt that bad. And I know that probably limited Pittman's impact and made Downs more of the guy. But what are your thoughts on Josh Downs? I think he's an absolute killer out there.
Yeah, I think we had a similar line of thinking here in terms of how we kind of evaluated Josh Downs' season. Just looking forward at some of the other awards that we're going to give out, I had him in mind for a different award. Most poised for a breakout. Yeah, I think statistically, I think he can go off the charts. I think he proved this year he's the Colts wide receiver one. Even though he's a slot receiver, I think even when Pittman's back at full strength and after the year that Alec Pierce had, I think he's wide receiver one. And he's going to be your threat in the passing game, especially with the lack that they have at tight end. And I think really no matter what moves you can make at tight end, he should go into next season as the top passing option for this offense. So in that sense, yeah, poised for a breakout in 2025. I think that statistically, we could see a big year from him next year.
Yeah, and one of the things that really gets me excited about Josh Downs is just how he's also pretty clutch. He's starting to make those plays when they really matter. He's already played with now how many 3 different quarterbacks, man. It just seems like the Colts throw their receivers into the fray and just have them play with the most quarterbacks they can possibly make them play with. Alec Pierce, keep in mind, he's already played with like 6, or 7. So, but we got to get to yours. This one was really close for me. I was damn near about to do this one myself, but go ahead, Noah. I actually can't wait to talk about this guy. He's one of my favorite players.
Yeah, and I see the chat popping off with his name, and that's Laiatu Latu. Yeah, I think this year he had that opportunity with Samson Ebukam going down during training camp for the whole year. Had an opportunity to get a little bit more playing time than maybe the Colts wanted to rush him into at first. And even then, I feel like they were still kind of stubborn with the amount of playing time that they gave him, just helping him come along. But yeah, new defensive scheme. We've seen what Anarumo can do with some talented pass rushers, and I'm not saying that he's going to end up being Trey Hendrickson next year, but Anarumo really liked him when he evaluated him coming out of the draft. So yeah, Laiatu Latu, even with situation of Dio Adengbo maybe not coming back, maybe there's even some more snaps up for grabs on the defensive edge. So yeah, I think it was maybe overall a little bit disappointing because you draft this refined older rookie who's known for his arsenal of pass rush moves and the techniques that he's already developed and kind of how polished he was. So I think even on this podcast, I remember when we were during our draft day special, we were talking about him maybe being like a double-digit sack guy, hopefully coming into next year. And he didn't come close to those numbers, so maybe you feel like that's a little bit of a disappointment. But I don't think he had a bad year. He showed promise. He had a pretty good pressure rate. He was making some plays. There was more like earlier in the season that strip sack to end the game was one, and then you don't really remember a lot of big plays after that. But I think with the new defensive system, another year being in the NFL, he won't be a rookie next year. I think really the sky's the limit still for Latu.
And I understand that he didn't have this otherworldly season, right, as far as numbers go. But one thing that really stood out to me was 3 forced fumbles. Mm-hmm. I remember being physically at the Chicago Bears game and where they played the Colts, and Richardson just could not stop just turning the ball over. He looked awful. And Caleb Williams also couldn't get anything going because the Bears at the time had a completely hapless play caller and they weren't running the ball effectively. Laiatu Latu sealed the victory. You draft a guy like him to go out there on defense when the game's on the line. You need to stop the offense from getting a field goal, from getting a touchdown. This dude just walked out there. He goes right around the tackle. Williams goes back to throw and he just swats it. He doesn't tackle him, doesn't touch the guy, just swats the football out of his hand. Game's over. And literally Zaire Franklin and everybody take that guy and celebrate with him right over to the crowd. That told me, I understand that it might not be – first off, he was supposed to play less snaps. He was supposed to play exclusively on passing downs mostly. And so Ebukam gets hurt. And then you're kind of looking at this situation like, well, he was supposed to kind of rotate in with Ebukam, right? And all he does is go out there and continue to get better. And so I really like that. I think that Laiatu Latu has a lot to offer. I think that he's got a lot to prove, but I think that year 2 is going to be a big one for him. So the next one we have here, actually, before we get to the chat, yeah, everybody really, really hit on Latu here. And then there was also Bruce who says, I hope that AD Mitchell breaks out. Hey, man, I think that a lot of people hope that, especially when you invested a second round pick in him. And
For
Noah
sure.
actually made a funny comment one time after the show to me. He's like, all he does is get open. All he does is get open. Now let's hope that he can actually, haul in some of those passes. So he's clearly got a lot of skill. He just needs to, I guess, put the rest together. Also, Richardson needs to get him the football more accurately. I mean, it's a two-way street for both those guys. And I do have to highlight this comment since we just got most poised to a breakout finished. Jalen Carlies, man, this is a good one. I think that Jalen Carlies is the complete linebacker. I think that he's got a higher ceiling than Speed, than Franklin, than any linebacker on the roster right now. I mean, he can cover, he can tackle, he can pursue well, he can get in the backfield, he can sack. He's just a complete freaking football player that, by the way, used to play safety. So he's got those ball cover skills. This next one's really awesome. I think that I actually just changed mine in the thick of everything here because I realized I was going to put Leatu Latu for this, but I think who went last? Yeah, I went first last time. So this one's going to be biggest question mark for 2025. So the one that perhaps it fits even better for this one, but what Noah put, I think you have no choice. I think you absolutely are not sure what's going to happen. So Noah, without me giving away too much, who's yours?
Yeah, and I'm bummed because on the sheet it still says Latu Latu for yours, right? So I'm wish I knew who it was. Now there's suspense is on, but yeah, biggest question mark for me I think is similar in vein to an award we gave out earlier, where we both agreed that's going to be Anthony Richardson for biggest disappointment earlier this year, but biggest question mark going into next season, mainly
right.
because of the weight that has on this organization, not just the win-loss record, but the organization going forward. Yeah, in terms of just biggest question mark, the range of outcomes I think is a little bit narrower than it was when you drafted him, because you've kind of seen what could happen. You've seen the highs, you've seen the lows, but you've seen more of the lows, so you maybe know where to set your expectations a little bit more than you did his rookie year coming into this season. But still, I think that range of outcomes is variable enough that it can take you from a bottom feeder of a team where you're going 4-13 next season, or it could take you up into the playoffs as a division champion. So yeah, I mean, I think if you're asking me right now, I think the odds of him panning out and leading the Colts to a division championship next year are relatively low. I would say 40% or under on my end, just because of what we've seen and kind of maybe even like the consistency things, the professionalism questions that people have had coming out. I think that I don't have any information on the back end, but from the things that we've heard, that doesn't help his chances, right? It can only be a bad thing. So yeah, he's biggest question mark, and I think for 2025 and probably for 2026 and 2027, depending on what happens with the staff after 2025.
Yeah, and this is it's a perfect answer because I'm not confident right now either. I don't know how any Colts I mean, the coaches, they know way more. They see it every day. They see the work he's put in. I will say, once he got benched, you saw improvement. You did. That you can't deny it. But the biggest question mark, why he is for me, it's not mine, but why I think that he could be for me too. And originally I thought about that as well, is his injuries.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to pile up. You've had a concussion. Then you've had your shoulder. Then you've had this, then you've had that. And it's like, he's only 22, man. He's really starting to pile up these injuries. He only played 11 games. Then he played 6 in the previous season. I mean, you're talking about 17 games out of 35. Actually, no, 15, because it was 4 that he played in his rookie season. So you're talking about 15 games out of 35. That's not good. That's just not good. That's really, really concerning to me in your first 2 seasons. And yes, Matt Stafford, I know he got hurt in his rookie year. Whatever, man. I don't want to hear Richardson compared to Stafford. I don't want to hear Richardson compared to Josh Allen other than working with Chris Hess. Because right now, Anthony Richardson's got a lot to prove in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that I went through that whole spiel of talking about his play and everything and didn't even mention the number one thing that Chris Ballard said he was concerned about in the end of season presser about Anthony Richardson, and that was his health, like you just brought up. So even if you're saying on the field, maybe he's a 40% 40% chance to work out. Maybe he's a little bit higher on depending on who you are. Then you still have to factor in injuries and whether the percentage chance that he has to stay healthy throughout a whole season.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair, and it's the most important position on the field. So, I mean, we got to get something there. Hopefully, he can definitely. He can definitely. Hold on a second. We're gonna go ahead and remove a hilarious comment. So anyway, so the next one we're gonna get to is we are going to get to. Let's see what we got. We had the question mark. So yeah, so mine is a little bit more somber just because I don't know what is even going on with this guy, but it's Braden Smith. It's Braden Smith. There's a personal matter. We won't even talk about that. That's not why I'm saying that he is such a big question mark. He's been hurt. Okay, he's starting his knee. It just seems like he's always playing through an injury. And in 2024, we're talking about a serious, like some of these numbers are pretty concerning. So I can't remember how many games he played. I think he played like 12 maybe. We're talking about 24 pressures allowed. Okay. We're talking about 12 penalties. I mean, we're talking about like just 4 sacks allowed, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he didn't play a whole season, and so I think there's some concern here. I'm not really sure what the Colts are going to do with Braden Smith. The thing is, they do, both fortunately and unfortunately, they saved $16 million by cutting him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a cuttable guy. He really is. He is expendable right now. And I do think that the Colts are going to try to retain him as long as he still wants to play football. I cannot imagine the Colts saying, hey, get out of here. They're the team that really likes to hold on to their guys. Okay, so what are your thoughts on Braden Smith? I think that if for no other reason that he could be expendable, you're looking at, well, 2 things, the cap, and you're also looking at Matt Gonsalves, who played pretty serviceably in his absence.
Yeah, this one sucks because it's biggest question mark that we have absolutely zero answers for at this point, and there's really no way to get any of those answers until the Colts are ready to give us those. But yeah, man, biggest question mark. If you bring him back, I think that can only do. I think we mentioned this in the previous episode where we're talking about the fate of the season next year essentially hinges on whether Anthony Richardson can put it together or not. I think you invest everything you can into helping him make that happen. So giving him a solid tackle, above average tackle, starting over there in Braden Smith, and not turning maybe to a who was a rookie last year too early in Gonsalves. Maybe you don't want to turn into it or turn to him in a full-time role at this point, just because there's still a chance that he's not going to cut it as a full-time starter. I don't necessarily think that based off of the play that we saw from him, but man, it's not the year to be taking those kind of risks. So I think if Braden Smith's there for you and available for next season and back fully healthy, then I think that's a move you make to retain him.
Yeah, and it's all going to be about where he is with his personal matter, but it's also going to be about that health, because I'm telling you, it just seemed like he would pop up on that injury report all the time, just constantly. So I'm hoping that he gets everything figured out in that regard. So Raheem Jackson, let's go Colts. Let's go, my Colts Nation, ready for the 2025 draft. A lot of people are. Draft is a fun time, and that's where a lot of these guys we're talking about. I mean, the Colts really try to keep those draft picks together, and they try to build through the draft. So this next one's going to be this one's really important, but it might be some names where you're like, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But it's going to be the 2024 breakout stars. And both of these guys, luckily, are in an area where everyone said that you need more. All right, you need more. You need more consistency. You need more of this. You need more of that. It's all about more with this position group. It's the wide receivers. And so I'll go ahead and start this one out. Mine is yet again Alec Pierce. I couldn't not do it. I had to do it. He was just mossing people. He would run past defenders in a foot race. He got better at his route running. He's not a guy I don't think he's ever going to be this guy who's catching 70 passes in a season. I think if Alec Pierce hauls in 50 catches, though, oh, dear Lord, you're talking about at least a sub 1,000 yard, probably over 1,000 yard season, maybe 10 touchdowns. And he had 7 on 37 catches. That means that 1 out of every 5 catches was for a tud. I mean, the guy the guy broke out like I did. I didn't expect. Yeah, I didn't expect Nick Cross to break out. Okay, the way he did. Sure, I didn't expect Jalen Carlisle while he was out there for 10 games or 11 games to play as absolutely efficient as he did, like a starting linebacker. Sure, did anybody in their right mind think Alec Pierce was going to average 22.3 yards per catch on 37 catches and lead the NFL in that and be their biggest weapon downfield? I didn't. I expected that to possibly be A.D. Mitchell or Michael Pittman Jr. Okay, Alec Pierce, yet again, I had to put him here for a second one. I think he's very deserving of this. What were your thoughts on his breakout label here for number 14?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. I think maybe people would have imagined 22 yards per reception, but I don't think they would have imagined it over 37 catches throughout the whole season. I think maybe you thought that he would be this deep threat that would get maybe 4 or 5 big plays throughout the season and then sprinkle in really nothing in between. And you could kind of pencil him in for that, but he was consistently every game. You were worried that the opposing defense would be worried that he's going to house it. And it was so often. It was crazy how often that they did it and they still went to that well and he still delivered. So just to see that consistency was great when, like we said, I mean, going into the season because of the hype being so high for A.D. Mitchell with a second-round draft pick at the exact same role that he was supposed to fill. Just seeing him step up and put together a season that he hasn't had to this point in his career was awesome.
Yeah, and so of course we'll get to yours, Noah. I mean, this is another guy who just absolutely showed that he's probably going to be a star. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think maybe he broke out a little bit last year, right? Josh Downs in his rookie year in 2023, and you could kind of see what he was, but I think him doing it for a second straight year kind of proves that he's that guy, and it wasn't just that season with kind of a check down guy in Gardner Minshew where he was able to put up that volume. With Anthony Richardson, with Joe Flacco, he was targeted 102 times with 72 catches, 5 touchdowns, which I think was a big step up. And then just even over the course of the past 2 years, just showing he's really the only one on the offense, it seems like, that can improvise on a broken play. When a quarterback extends a play, he's the guy who finds the soft spot and gets open. And most of the time it's for a diving catch that he ends up coming down with. I think he's far and away wide receiver 1, like I mentioned, on this offense, in jersey number and on the depth chart he should be. And I think that's just the move going forward, is you operate under the assumption that he's going to get 100 plus targets every season, and he's going to produce around 1,000 yards, maybe going from here on out.
Yeah, both these guys, and guess what? They're both pass catchers. So this is also why Anthony Richardson, the excuses are going to be gone. They're going to be gone next year because you got Pittman, you got Pierce, you got Josh Downs, just those 3. If A.D. Mitchell somehow figures it out and they get a tight end, the excuses are done. So this next one's pretty interesting. I really like this next one. It is the best coach. Okay, so I will go ahead. I mean, Noah's is just an absolute unit of a schemer, of a guy, just of an overall motivator for these guys. You saw what happened in 2022. Offensive line looked depleted, dude. Looked absolutely over the BS, winning 4 games. This guy comes in. Tell him.
Yeah, so I went with Tony Sparano Jr. here, the offensive line coach.
It's a good one. It's a real good one.
This is a year, man, where just under Shane Steichen, there was a lot of regression. You think from all the units, which makes you assume the coaching staff had some regression there as well. On the defensive side of the ball, it didn't really feel safe picking anybody when the defensive coordinator has to go. At the offensive side of the ball, I'm not going with tight ends coach Tom Manning, even though I think he contributes a little bit more. Not going with the quarterback coach just because of the disappointment that was Anthony Richardson's season this year. But Tony Sparano Jr. just kept that consistency up. This was consistently the best group on the offensive side of the ball. You've got guys who you expected to play well that played well in Quentin Nelson and Bernard Ryman, Ryan Kelly. You have Will Fries, who was playing out of his mind for the first 5 weeks before he went down. Then you had Dalton Tucker come in as an undrafted guy. And just even to feel comfortable putting an undrafted guy at right guard, he had to know what he was doing to some extent. And it takes a lot to coach up someone like that and get them ready for a starting lineup. And then you had Tanner Bortolini playing in his time as a rookie and Gonsalves playing as a rookie. So, I mean, he was dealing with a lot of moving pieces. And the offensive line didn't have maybe its best season that the Colts have had at offensive line in the past 5 years, but it was a consistent unit. It was consistently one of the best or the best unit on the offensive side of the ball. And I think he deserves this accolade here.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Sprono Jr. has completely revamped the offensive line at the end of the day, and that's exactly what they need. You can't develop a quarterback without an offensive line. You can't run the football without an offensive line. You can't win in the NFL without an offensive line. And Tony Sprono Jr. constant rotations going on. I mean, think about right guard. Oh my goodness, man! I mean, that was just a mess of a position at one point this season with Dalton Tucker and Mark Lewinsky playing okay, and then the floor fell out from those guys at times. But Tony Sprono Jr., the constant. I'm going Reggie Wayne. I see a lot of Reggie Wayne comments in there. Both these coaches take the cake. All right. What else can you say about Reggie Wayne? He said to everybody, give Alec Pierce time. Okay, it's not that easy to adjust in the NFL. They gave Alec Pierce time. That worked out. Pounds the table for Josh Downs. Undersized receiver, not your typical Ballard receiver. Sure worked out. Reggie Wayne is a great coach. He's a great coach. He's been able to translate that future Hall of Fame play right into coaching and bestowing that knowledge right into these guys. And they look great. Michael Pittman looks great. You're hoping that A.D. Mitchell can put it together. I trust Reggie Wayne with A.D. Mitchell. I wouldn't want him in under anyone else's tutelage. So what were your thoughts on Reggie Wayne as a coach? I think that when they originally hired him, I was like, this is a home run. But just the fact he's been able to translate what he did on the field over to a coach, that's just even more astonishing.
Yeah. Awesome to see him, the legacy that he's had as a player, and now seeing him as a coach legitimately change the team. By being able to, or pounding that table, like you said, for Josh Downs to bring him in because he was the guy, and it's clear he's the guy. And then seeing Alec Pierce take the leap that he took, it was a little disappointing seeing A.D. Mitchell's rookie year end up the way it was going. But I mean, he was so patient with Alec Pierce and saying the production was going to come. And like you said, Reggie Wayne's the coach of the receivers. And we want him to be the coach of the receivers because of the track record that he's had developing these young guys. And at some point, the coach can't do it all for the player, and the player has to want it. So we hope that A.D. Mitchell takes that step because he has those resources at his disposal. That's proven to be successful with other young players in the league. So I think if you see A.D. Mitchell break out in the next couple years, maybe it won't be next year because it took Alec Pierce a little bit longer. But if you see A.D. Mitchell break out and really kind of blossom into the receiver we think he is going to be, it's very, very clear the talent that Reggie Wayne has. And he'll be more than a receiver coach if that's something that he ever wants.
And he's a motivator. I mean, clearly he's a motivator. I know I go right back to Michael Pittman. I understand that he's an absolute monster and he'll play through anything.
Yeah.
But my goodness, man, Reggie Wayne, his motivation, just his personality, he understands what these receivers are going through, and he understands, and he's turned these guys not into divas. I mean, the jury's still out on Mitchell, right? But I think that he's in good hands. So we've got two more here. This next one is going to be the best 2024 rookie. So I'll go ahead and start here. I put Tanner Bortolini. I thought that, to be the general of the offensive line as a rookie, to just be thrust in there behind a guy like Ryan Kelly, a 4-time Pro Bowler. I was so impressed. He's athletic. He's quick with his feet. He's quick with his hands. He's a smart player. Did he look bad at times? Of course. He's a freaking rookie. He's a 4th-round selection, and he's a little bit. He's a little bit of a smaller center, but my goodness, man, this guy plays with a punch. I mean, he's going to be successful if he just continues to climb. And, like I said, there were letdowns, but overall, I mean, given the situation of that offensive line at times, I thought Tanner Bortolini legitimately looked like a future starter at center for the Colts.
Yeah, I think that's why you go into this offseason with Ryan Kelly as a pending free agent. You don't feel so bad. Yeah, I think this is the Pickens were a little bit slim in terms of best rookie just because of how little got playing time. And just how many made an immediate impact. But I think going forward, you feel good about the opportunity that Bortolini has to jump into that center role and really take a hold of it and blossom into a full-time starter.
Yeah, and it gives you a lot of confidence because you don't want to have a center that can't adjust. And I'm telling you, he adjusted to things so well for a rookie. I was very impressed.
Yeah.
But we'll go ahead and get to yours. This one's unavoidable. Had to say it. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I think it's the obvious choice just by default in terms of the amount of snaps that he took and the impact that he was able to have as a rookie, and that's Laiatu Latu. There weren't a ton of other options in terms of just pure playing time. I know we mentioned the year was maybe a little bit disappointing in terms of the expectations that we had for him coming in as the first defensive player selected. You were kind of hoping for a little bit of a splashier impact. But played about 50% of the snaps on defense, which for a defensive, it doesn't sound that high when you're looking at Quentin Nelson playing 100% of the snaps in every game and Zaire Franklin playing 100% of snaps. But for the defensive line, that's a pretty high snap share. You're not going to see that many guys that are pushing the 80% like you do on the offensive side of the ball sometimes. So I think 50% was a fair share for a first round rookie. And then, like we said, this season may be a little bit disappointing, but poised for a breakout next year, I think.
Yeah, and I think that Laiatu Latu has all of the skills. He's very quick off the line. He has incredible bend. He can get underneath the arms of these offensive tackles. He just keeps on working with his technique. It's all about technique, and he's got constant movement. He's going to switch moves on you. He's never going to use the same thing over and over. He's got an absolute bag of weapons to use against offensive tackles. And I really hope they move him around a little bit. I'd love to see him play maybe a little bit on the interior. I just think that he's so fast and athletic. So the last ones we're going to get to with these ones this is awesome. So I'm actually going to change this just a bit to MVPs. So these guys are who we think just took over as the best players respectfully. We'll go ahead and start with you, Noah. Who's your MVP of the Indianapolis Colts 2024 season?
Yeah, so I went with a guy who a lot of people were clamoring for earlier on in the show, and that's DeForest Buckner, who I think just made the biggest impact when he was on the field. Maybe he wasn't available for all the games, like some of the most consistent players that we talked about, but when he was on the field, he was making a huge impact. And then at the end of the year, the locker clean out, we saw him perfectly state how he felt the state of the franchise was going. And then you hear Chris Ballard immediately be like, yeah, I agree with everything he said. He's on it. So that just shows the leader that he is and the kind of the big picture view that he has, and kind of how much he cares for this team and how much he wants to see it push and be a little bit more competitive. So it was awesome to see him. He's always been a leader since he came to Indianapolis, but it feels like he kind of took a step a little bit further where maybe you have another defensive captain who didn't show that leadership as much as you were hoping. And you see DeForest Buckner kind of pick up the slack in that sense and kind of be that old head on the defensive side of the ball and that stalwart. And when he's on the field, you feel his presence at all times.
Yeah, DeForest Buckner is he's just constantly going to be a top player. It doesn't matter. I don't really think it matters how much he ages. At some point it's gonna matter. But right now, I don't care. I don't care what his age is. He's playing at another level every single game. We'll go ahead and get to the super chat. NFL Nerd with the Canadian currency. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, my friend. What does Latu need to work on this offseason? Oh man, I would say really just continuing his technique. I would just say continuing to do what he was doing. There were times where he'd get, I'd say run defense. Run defense is definitely Laiatu Latu's weakness. What do you think, Noah? Do you think that there's anything pressing that Latu needs to work on? I think it's just a matter of, one, he was thrust into more snaps than they wanted, and two, kind of like drinking from a fire hose. You just have to eventually adjust to it, and I think he's got the skills for it.
Yeah, I think it'll come with time. One thing that's a little bit rough about his offseason is he's going to a new defensive scheme, a new defensive coordinator in his second year.
Yes.
So you kind of spent that last offseason being a rookie and kind of learning a whole system. And then this whole offseason, you were kind of, you would hope that you could just refresh on things you already know and double down and hit the books in that sense, and then come out strong the next training camp or when OTAs come around. But he's going to have to spend time learning a new defensive system, and it's not going to be like the rigors of his rookie offseason where he had to do all the draft prep and combine prep and things like that. So he has the full offseason. It shouldn't be too big of a deal. He seems like a bright kid. And I don't expect that to be an issue, but I think he definitely needs to work on acclimating to this new scheme so he can come out ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for Latu as far as what he can do. But we'll go ahead and just so we can get to some of these news and rumors. My MVP is Jonathan Taylor, and I feel like it needs to be because only played. I mean, he still missed 3 games. Had 303 attempts for 1,431 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. By the way, people, he averaged more rushes per game than he ever has in his entire career. And yes, that also includes his damn near MVP season in 2021 with Carson Wentz. Jonathan Taylor, man, he averaged, let's see, he averaged, oh, I can't even find it now. Um, he he was consistent. Oh, that's my apologies. That's advanced. He was averaging 4.7 yards per carry. I mean, the guy was averaging 102 yards a game. He really shouldered the offense at times. I felt like they force fed him. Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson were underwhelming. This guy was basically the entire backfield when you didn't really set it up that way. I know Steichen likes to use one guy mostly. But I think that Jonathan Taylor showed that he is the undisputed most effective offensive player, and he's the most important offensive player until Anthony Richardson takes off or Josh Downs ascends to a star. I think he's the best offensive player, the best weapon, most important. What were your thoughts on JT?
Yeah, obviously a sour taste in some people's mouths because of the Broncos game,
Sure.
but I mean, yeah, clear and away, he's the most explosive player on the offense. You talk about Alec Pierce being a deep threat, he is, but I mean, Jonathan Taylor's busting 70-yard runs in between the tackles. I mean, he's the only guy that can take a routine play like that and bust it wide open and consistently. I mean, over 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns. You don't get that kind of production and not be considered for kind of these team MVP awards or these most valuable guys. I mean, he just was what he's always been. I think maybe last year we were worried the production was going to fall off a little bit after the injuries, after the contract dispute. He didn't kind of seem like the same guy. This year there was no questions that JT is the JT of old, and having Anthony Richardson in the backfield with him, he was the half of the rushing offense. Like he was that half that worked out, right? I mean, and Anthony Richardson was good in the run game also, but I mean, when you picture those two back there together, you think of Jonathan Taylor having the season that he had, and then you also expect some more production in the pass game to go with it. He did it without the production in the pass game, so that was awesome to see.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taylor still needs to be a better pass blocker, still needs to be a better receiver. Guess what? I think
Yeah,
he is who he is. He is the offense. He is the workload. I'm hoping to get him a little bit of help because I just don't think you can run him 20, 22, 23, 25 times a game and expect to win. But we're going to go ahead and kind of rip through these Colts news and rumors really quick. The first one right out of the gate is that the Colts hired former Baltimore Ravens coach Chris Hewitt as the DB's coach and pass game coordinator. I think that this has Lou Anarumo written all over it.
Yeah.
He's already addressing the defensive backs. I think that Chris Ballard said, we have to play better. We have to play better. That's all he was saying. I think this is a good hire, especially given his track record. And I think Anarumo also knows what he's getting.
Yeah, well-respected coach. And I think one thing that was interesting here when they hired him, giving him that pass game coordinator title, which the Colts haven't used on the defensive side of the ball in the past. So that's cool to see them kind of delegating different roles in that way, and kind of how this new staff is coming into place under Shane Steichen when he gets his defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and so then the next thing is that Ryan Kelly. So this is something that he actually told Fox 59's Mike Chappell, whose name is, which is what the Colts' media room is literally named after, is Mike Chappell. Ryan Kelly will see what's out there in free agency. Just quick question: do you think he's worth retaining?
I think he's probably worth the contract that he's wanting, but not for the Colts. Right. So I think he's a player who's got a lot in the tank and has a lot to offer a team and can be that signal caller on the offensive line. I think teams are going to find that valuable where it is that he wants to play, regardless of where it's going to be at. Just by virtue of seeing what's out there, I guess you kind of assume that. Yeah, I think he's going to be worth the money, but I think the Colts are in the situation where it's time to move on for them.
Yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, it's still a business. You really have to make the right business decision. And yet again, you have Tanner Bortolini. You got to at some point let this kid rock and roll at center. So we'll have to see what they do with Ryan Kelly, but that's something to monitor. Lastly, this is just going to be a simple one.
Yeah.
Myles Garrett requests a trade. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, are you even doing anything realistically with this? Because I'll tell you right now, whoever the heck trades for him, they are going to pony up something pretty crazy, I think.
Yeah. The one thing that I threw this on here just because I wanted to hit on it briefly, but I wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, the last trade that Chris Ballard made was pick number 14 for DeForest, or was it 13? I don't remember what it was, for DeForest Buckner, someone who was already a stud in a situation where they were trying to move on the defensive line. I mean, there's some parallels where we've seen things like this happen. I think it would take more than the Colts first round pick this year. How much more, I'm not sure. And if you're a Colts fan, I think you're probably hoping they don't dip into the 2026 draft class and give up any picks in that sense, just for sake of if you need to move on, you'll have the flexibility there. But I just brought this up to say they made the trade for DeForest Buckner before. This wouldn't be unprecedented. But also Myles Garrett wants to go somewhere and compete for a Super Bowl, he said, and that's very clearly not the Colts. So not thinking that this is happening.
Yeah, no, the Colts might kick the tires on it, but it's going to take a lot, and I mean it's going to take a lot for the Browns are going to get back some of the capital. I think that they've lost from spending so much money on Deshaun Watson. So, but hey, guys, that is our show. Really appreciate you guys hanging in an hour and 5 minutes. It was a marathon, but please like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow Indianapolis Colts on SI.com and on X, subscribe to Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube, click the bell. If you want to listen to us, of course, subscribe on Apple, subscribe on Spotify. We are everywhere. And just have to tell you guys, thank you so much for all of the comments. I mean, we also I got to highlight the super chats here. Truett Trussler, Patrick Rye, the CFO, and the one and only NFL nerd, and plus all of you other wonderful people in the chat. Go follow me on X at DWalsterDrake, or it's at DWalsterDrake, and then you've got Noah Gebert over there at Noah Gebert. And we are going to be back on Thursday. Now, we are going to continuously bring you Colts news. We're going to continuously bring you anything we'll try to do whatever we can with breaking news if it fits the schedule. But yeah, until then, guys, I hope that everyone out there is staying safe, staying warm. It's still a little bit cold, and we will see you all right here live on Thursday night. Take it easy.